Clint Eastwood spent 7 decades inside the Hollywood machine as an actor, a director, and a man who watched more beautiful faces pass through sound stages than almost anyone alive. But only one woman on this list ever actually shared his life, his films, and his home. The rest are simply the icons who defined the eras he lived and worked through, the faces that shaped what beautiful meant in American cinema, decade after decade. Tonight, we look at 7 of Hollywood's most unforgettable women, the real stories behind their fame, and where Clint Eastwood's own life genuinely intersected with theirs, and where it didn't. 1. Sandra Locke. Of everyone on this list, Sandra Locke is the only woman whose life became permanently, factually entangled with Clint Eastwood's, not through admiration from a distance, but through 14 years of shared films, a shared home, and one of the most bitter breakups in Hollywood history. Born Sandra Louise Smith on May 28, 1944, in Shelbyville, Tennessee, Locke grew up far from the glamour she would eventually become known for. Her debut role changed everything. In 1968's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, she played a lonely teenager opposite Alan Arkin, and the performance earned her an Academy Award nomination on her very first outing, a rare feat that marked her as one of the most promising young actresses in America. Locke met Eastwood in 1975 on the set of The Outlaw Josie Wales. Both were married to other people at the time, Locke to sculptor Gordon Anderson, in what was by all accounts a close but non-romantic marriage, and Eastwood to his first wife, Maggie Johnson. 2. Marilyn Monroe. No name is more permanently fused with the idea of Hollywood beauty than Marilyn Monroe's. Born Norma Jean Mortensen in Los Angeles in 1926, she spent part of her childhood in foster care and an orphanage before an early marriage and a modeling career launched her toward the movies. By the mid-1950s, Monroe had become the defining sex symbol of post-war America, thanks to films like Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. Her white dress over the subway great moment from The 7-Year Itch remains one of the most reproduced images in film history. But Monroe fought throughout her career against being reduced to a pin-up. She studied at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, sought out dramatically demanding roles, and delivered acclaimed performances in Bus Stop and Some Like It Hot. 3. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman brought something to American cinema that Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with at first, an actress who felt entirely natural on screen, in an era built on manufactured glamour. Born in Stockholm in 1915, Bergman had already built a career in Swedish cinema before David O. Selznick brought her to Hollywood in 1939. She became a major star through a run of classics almost unmatched in film history, Casablanca in 1942, Gaslight in 1944, for which she won her first Academy Award, Notorious in 1946, and Spellbound in 1945. Her performance as Ilsa in Casablanca remains one of the most iconic in American film. Bergman's career was nearly derailed in 1950 when she left her husband and daughter for Italian director Roberto Rossellini while still married, a scandal that made her persona non grata in Hollywood and even led to her being denounced on the floor of the U.S. Senate. She spent years working primarily in 4. Sophia Loren. Sophia Loren represented something American cinema hadn't fully seen before, a European sex symbol whose appeal was rooted in maturity and confidence rather than ingenuine innocence. Born Sofia Villani Ciccolone in Rome in 1934, Loren grew up in poverty in Pozzuoli during the Second World War before entering beauty contests and small film roles as a teenager. Her collaboration with director Vittorio De Sica produced her most acclaimed work, including Two Women, 1960, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Actress. The first time the award went to a performance in a non-English language film, a record that stood for decades. Loren became an international star through films like Marriage Italian Style and a decades-long screen partnership with Marcello Mastroianni, while also building a substantial career in American cinema. She has remained a working actress and public figure well into her 80s and 90s, a longevity few of her contemporaries matched. There's no verified record of any personal encounter between Loren and Clint Eastwood, at Cannes or anywhere else. Their careers ran on largely separate tracks. Loren mostly in Italian and international. 5. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn's beauty became a template that Hollywood is still copying today, understated, elegant, defined as much by bearing and restraint as by any single feature. Born in Brussels in 1929 to a British father and Dutch Baroness mother, Hepburn spent part of her childhood in Nazi-occupied Netherlands during World War II, an experience of wartime deprivation that she later said shaped her lifelong humanitarian instincts. She trained as a ballet dancer before turning to acting, and her breakout role in 1953's Roman Holiday won her the Academy Award for Best Actress in her first major American film. She went on to define an era of Hollywood elegance in Sabrina, Funny Face, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and My Fair Lady, while also working with fashion designer Hubert de Givenchy in a partnership that shaped both her personal style and mid-century fashion more broadly. Later in life, Hepburn largely stepped back from acting to become a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, undertaking field missions in some of the world's poorest regions until shortly before her death from appendiceal cancer in 1993, at age 63. There's no documented meeting or working relationship between Hepburn and Clint Eastwood on record. Their careers occupied very different corners of the industry. Hepburn largely in romantic comedies and dramas out of major studios, Eastwood building his name through television westerns and, later, the gritty international productions that would define his early film stardom. Hepburn's inclusion here rests on something more durable than any single person's opinion. She remains one of the few classic-era stars whose look, wardrobe, and screen persona are still actively referenced in fashion and film nearly a century after her birth, a rare kind of staying power built on restraint rather than spectacle. 6. Jean Seberg. Jean Seberg's story is one of the most genuinely tragic in this list, a career that began with extraordinary promise and ended under the weight of a real, documented campaign of government harassment. Born in Marshalltown, Iowa, in 1938, Seberg was famously chosen from roughly 18,000 hopefuls by director Otto Preminger to star in his 1957 film St. Joan. The film was a critical and commercial failure, and the pressure of that very public search damaged Seberg's early confidence. She rebounded, however, by moving to France, where she starred in Jean-Luc Godard's 1960 film Breathless, one of the defining works of the French New Wave, and became, alongside her famous pixie haircut, an enduring symbol of that movement's style. In the late 1960s, Seberg became a financial supporter of civil rights causes, including the Black Panther Party. This drew the attention of the FBI's COINTELPRO program. Declassified documents later confirmed that the Bureau specifically targeted Seberg with a planted, false story intended to humiliate her, which contributed to a miscarriage and years of subsequent depression. Seberg died in 1979, at age 40, in an apparent suicide in Paris, a death her family and biographers have directly linked to the sustained government harassment she endured. 7. Raquel Welch. Raquel Welch built one of the most enduring images of 1960s sex appeal largely without needing to say a word. Born Jo Raquel Tejada in Chicago in 1940, Welch's career-defining moment came with 1960 SIX's 1 Million Years BC, in which a single promotional photo of her in a fur bikini became one of the best-selling pin-up posters of all time, arguably more famous than the film itself. Welch spent much of the following 2 decades pushing back against being defined solely by that image, taking on roles in films like Myra Breckinridge and Kansas City Bomber, and winning a Golden Globe for her comedic performance in 1973's The Three Musketeers. Welch remained a visible public figure well past the era that made her famous, later building a successful haircare and wig business and continuing to act into her 70s. She died in February 2023 at age 82. There is no verified record of any personal meeting or working relationship between Welch and Clint Eastwood. Both were active in the Hollywood studio system during overlapping decades, but they never appeared in a film together, and no documented account of a direct personal encounter between them exists. Welch's lasting reputation is built on the same thing that made her famous in the first place, a single image so powerful it outlasted the film that produced it, and a career-long refusal to let that image